Hello and welcome to this short video about religion and whether it can act as a conservative force to enable the maintenance of the status quo, or can it enable social change? So most of the content of what we've looked at so far has said, no, religion doesn't cause change, it acts as a conservative force, and that's been emphasised by the functionalist views, the Marxist views and the feminist views that we've looked at. Religion stands in the way of change and it conserves tradition and what's been done before. However, there is an argument from Max Weber and others, and some neo-Marxists, that religion can actually change society. So the conservative role of religion emphasises the traditional beliefs which offer structure in society, and where religion plays a part in that, it acts to conserve and preserve the status quo in the traditional beliefs. There's evidence that there's a lot of conservatism in religion. In other words, an emphasis on traditional beliefs. For example, moral beliefs about the sanctity of human life, about the relationship to your neighbours, and the nature of private property, like theft. All of these kinds of principles are based on, from a Marxist perspective, traditional capitalist beliefs which protect private property, from a functionist perspective, which promote benefits for all. Family, emphasis on the natural union of man and woman, the idea of the natural family, heterosexual family, which is very traditional, and gender roles based on traditional relationships between men and women, with men being dominant. It's often found in some aspects of Christianity, Hinduism and Islam. Arranged marriage, where again we find an emphasis on this in some religions, that this again is a traditional practice which is supported by religion. Again, this can be contested and debated upon, because some would argue that arranged marriage is a cultural artefact and not supported by religion. But of course there will then be people who argue on the other side of that. So the functionalists emphasise religion acts as a conservative force, so they could be used to evaluate any view which says religion can act to change society. Marxists and feminists again would say that religion acts to protect capitalism, or in the case of feminists, to protect men. So how can religion enable social change? So Weber argues that religion creates change in the case of the Protestant Ethic, which is this set of beliefs or ethics from Protestantism, which is a form of Christian beliefs, and it's also known as Calvinism. It's based on the ideas of someone called Calvin, and Weber argues that modern capitalist values, the beliefs we find in a modern capitalist society, are actually influenced by the beliefs of Protestantism, and that includes the values of individualism, rationality, profit, and acting in a systematic and efficient way, to earn money, to work hard, and to avoid wastage or luxury, idleness or laziness. So this is actually what Weber thinks is the spirit of capitalism, and he thinks that this comes from religion. Calvinist beliefs are a particular form of religion though, so this isn't found across the world in the past. So Weber thinks this is a particularly Western European invention. He thinks there's no elective affinity. So to understand the term of elective affinity, we have to understand that affinity means similarity, and elective is to do with the idea of the elect. So the elect are those who are chosen by God to be saved for heaven when they die. So Weber actually thinks that there's a similarity between, or affinity, a closeness between the beliefs about the idea that there are people who are saved for heaven, and the idea of working hard in capitalism. So how does this work? Let's look at how this works. So one of the ideas within Calvinism is predestination. So the people who are going to be saved, it's already decided, it's predestined. So We don't know who's going to be saved, but it's already, the decision's made before we're even born, whether we're going to die or go to heaven. As well as the decision already being made by God before we were born, God's will is unknowable. So he's mysterious and all-powerful, and he transcends us, he's above us, divine transcendence. So therefore, we, again, can't ever know whether we will be saved or not. And this ends up in salvation panic. So this situation where we're predestined to die or go to heaven, we can't know God's will, leads to a lot of worry and anxiety. Are we going to be saved, or will we die? And so Weber argues that the beliefs of Calvin were a kind of new approach to the problem of life and death in religion, where he recommended asceticism, which is to avoid luxury, discipline and hard work. Now, what happened as a result of this is that we have this situation of what we call this worldly asceticism. So being ascetic in this world means avoiding luxury and, worshipping God in the world that you live in. And this is different to what we call otherworldly asceticism, which is to do with leaving the normal world and going into a different world, which is the world of the monastery or the religious retreat. So by introducing this concept of being able to work hard as a way of worshipping God, which is this worldly asceticism, avoiding luxury and worshipping God in that way, this created a psychological solution to salvation panic, worry and anxiety about whether we're going to be saved. Because by earning money, by building profit, by becoming wealthy and successful, people were reassured psychologically that they were one of the elect. Now this goes against their central idea that God's will is unknowable, but this is what happened over time. They slightly changed their beliefs, and as a result, they started to think this is a sign that God is going to save them for heaven after death. So the more rich and wealthy and successful they became, the more they thought, this is a sign that God has saved us. And this contradicts their original doctrine that God's will is unknowable, but it means that acquiring more and more money becomes a sign that they are saved, and it becomes the spirit of capitalism, profit for its own sake, the individual accruing wealth and avoiding luxury as a way of worshipping God gradually becomes the spirit of capitalism and the purpose and meaning of life. Now this does not happen in India and China, okay, so we have a different setup there, so it's worth being aware of that. So let's look at that. So in terms of the Protestant ethic, Weber argues that this was unique. Other societies had the material development and economic development to, potentially have this form of society with great wealth and success, but they still failed to develop the kind of modern capitalism that's rational, very organised, very bureaucratic, with big organisations. That's what bureaucracies are, big organisations. Organisations with lots of different levels and hierarchies like McDonald's or Coca-Cola, which are very, very efficient and systematic and methodical in their accruing wealth. So why was it that other countries didn't develop this form of capitalism? So if you look at India, you find that there's a Hindu religion there, and that has a form of asceticism, but it's an otherworldly asceticism, so it involves rejecting and giving up the way of life of normal kind of business and entrepreneurship, and instead kind of rejecting and retreating from the world. And so this didn't lead to the kind of rational form of modern capitalism that Weber thinks is distinctively caused by the Protestant ethic. in terms of China, he argues that Confucianism, the more predominant religion there, was a this-worldly religion. So it was emphasizing religion in this world and not emphasizing a kind of sense of God outside of the world. And therefore, again, the emphasis on hard work and avoiding luxury wasn't there in terms of China, because people were, going to enjoy luxury and material things, and that was part of the lifestyle and culture in that country, and therefore their religious interpretation was different, and therefore it didn't lead to this rational, hard work, avoiding luxury type of religion that Weber thinks is a distinctive product of the Protestant ethic in particular. So we can look at several problems with Weber's argument. First of all, he's often seen as debating with Marx's ghost because he's got similar ideas about modern society and about the importance of these big structures like the class system. He's very interested in the class system and interested in the development of the class system and capitalism. And in many ways he argues there's inequality in capitalism. But the difference is that Marx foregrounded economic factors as driving change in society, whereas Weber argues it's the ethics which create social change. In this case, this is a really good example of that, because the Protestant ethic is a set of beliefs which leads to social change according to Weber, whereas Marx would argue that it requires economic change for change to take place. So someone like Kautsky contradicts Weber's theory and argues that capitalism occurred before the Protestant Reformation and Calvinism, and so therefore it's not ethics that led to capitalism, it's actually the economic development in that particular Western European context, but it's not a result of the religious beliefs of Protestantism, as Weber argues. Another argument is that technological change rather than ethics and religious beliefs caused the birth of capitalism. According to Tawney, the bourgeoisie adopted Calvinist beliefs to legitimate the pursuit of economic gain. So again, it's this kind of chicken and egg situation, which came first. So Weber argues that the Calvinist beliefs came first, but the Marxist view here is that the bourgeoisie used the Calvinist beliefs after developing wealth and success economically to justify their position and justify their wealth and success, and to feel they're acceptable and good about it. The lack of capitalism in Calvinist countries like Scotland is another argument put forward by Gordon Marshall. He would argue that, again, you do find Calvinist beliefs there, but you don't find the modern capitalist wealth and success. And the problem here is not to do with ethics and values and beliefs being lacking, because the beliefs are there. The reason for the lack of capitalism is the lack of investment in capital and skilled labour. So this supports Weber because it means that for capitalism to emerge, the economic factors... Okay, let's start that bit again. Okay, edit this later. So another argument supports Weber in contrast to Marxists. Gordon Marshall supports Weber. He points out that there's a lack of capitalism in Calvinist countries like Scotland, and there was a lack of investment in capital and skilled labour here in Scotland, and therefore this supports Weber because it suggests that cultural and material factors were both needed for capitalism to emerge. So again, it's not to do with economic development as Marxist suggests, it's to do with the conjunction or the togetherness of cultural factors, the Protestant beliefs, Calvinist beliefs, and the material economic investment, which also needed to coexist with this. Okay, so that's the Weberian view of religion and social change.